So I just got a new intake in for the 2014 JK Jeep. I ordered the Injen Evo, I believe it's a 5003. Let's see if it says on the side of the box. There we go. It's a pretty much a cold air intake. All the cold air intakes, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them they have for this are really cold air because they pull air right out of the engine bay. This will do that as well, but it at least isolates the air inlet to the side, kind of where the factory box air inlet is. So hopefully it shields it from a lot of the hot air closer to the engine. The reason why I got this is primarily when I bought the Jeep, and I'll show in a second, it has the rough country, what they call their cold air intake, and it's an oiled filter. I'm not a big fan of oiled filters, and just overall kind of a cheap design. I don't think it's bad. It's just, you know, kind of cost based. This has the dry nano web filter. So typically these filter a little bit better than the oileds, and the maintenance is a heck of a lot easier. These ones you just blow or vacuum them out. What I thought was interesting about this one is it's got this little nipple on it for a pressure gauge to tell you when the filter needs to be changed. It's just something to be aware of. If you don't like that feature, you're going to need to plug this off because you'll suck in unfiltered air through that. I mean, not a lot, but you still will. But all in all, looks pretty nice. Roto molded. You know, if you're looking to be able to see the filter, this is not the option you want. It's all roto molded. It's pretty nice. I mean, nothing special here. Plenty of branding. But yeah, everything came packaged up nice. And here's a look at what was in it. I bought this used, so it didn't have the factory box, which is kind of disappointing because I'd rather just have the factory box, to be honest. But you can see this isn't bad. I think it's a rough country intake, or it's a variation thereof. I guess maybe this isn't the rough country one because it doesn't have the branding on it, but I believe they're all pretty much the same. It's just an aluminum tube with an oiled filter and kind of a basic heat shield. So we're going to pull that out and install this one. So removing this particular intake is going to be pretty straightforward. We've got two hose clamps here to pull it off the throttle body. There's this vent clamp, and then underside of it somewhere, it's right around the bend, there's the temperature sensor. So be careful of that when you're bringing the tube out so you don't, you know, pull on the lead. You're gonna have to take that out and move it into the engine set. I think there's a little bit more involved than removing the factory one, but it is pretty much just removing this tube. The factory one, you also have to remove these two bolts that hold this overflow line for the radiator, because the actual factory intake pipe mounts on these. I think that's really the only other item that you would need to remove. You need to take it from the throttle body, take the sensor, this vent line, and then you've got the whole air box in here with the factory one, so you need to pop it free of its grommets. So we're gonna go ahead and pull this guy out. Just wanted to point this out. If anybody's installing an intake like this with this shield, you can see right there, you know, maybe you can't, now you can see it a little bit. This is starting to rub on the power steering reservoir output. Sorry, there it is. That's the power steering reservoir. Luckily, I don't appear to have any damage right now. It looks okay, but I don't know, with a fair amount of off-roading and vibration, that probably wouldn't pan out so well. So if you're doing something like this, make sure you take a look at all those areas of contact. I mean, you could remedy this by running some weather stripping on there to stop it from abrading and damaging that line. Just a heads up. Okay, so the first step is to take the coupling that goes to the throttle body and install that onto the throttle body. Make sure you've got your hose clamp in a position where you'll like it. What I do is I took a rag, just wipe out the inside of this a little bit, make sure it's not super linty. I found this little sticker on the inside of this coupling. I would highly suggest you remove that just in case, you know, you don't want it to come free and get sucked in. So get everything wiped down, and then let's pop that guy on, do this clamp, tighten up, and we'll see what that is. I think that's probably 8 or 10 millimeter it is an 8mm. So I think all the hose clamps in this are going to be 8mm. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up and move on to the next step. Another thing I wanted to note, when you're tightening these type of worm gear clamps, I'd highly recommend not using power tools or something that could lead you to overdrive them. I found quite a few of these, including the kit I just removed, and I even found it on my Colorado, because they had a factory installed intake. These get torqued really hard to the side, and what it does is it causes, these are made not very well, it causes this pinched bracket to pop free on one side, and then it doesn't engage well and it sits crooked. And so just tighten them down enough, and I would recommend not using a tool that's going to drive it too hard. And what it does is it torques the whole thing to one side, so it's putting leverage and it's pulling this side away when you're tightening it. So just be easy on them. There's some that are better than others. Most of these are, let me see if I can show you. See, most of these are pinched together on the inside. I've seen some where they're nicer, and this is not. This is one solid piece, so they're much more durable, but what happens is when you twist them hard, this pulls away from this little tabbed area, and then it's less effective. So, I mean, you crank down on them, but you end up with a less effective seal because you get this thing bent. Anyway, just a quick note. So the next step they have is to mount the filter to the kind of the coupling bracket, and then you're going to install your little monitor, I guess, little gauge to tell you whether you're clean or dirty into the air box, because you have to fish it through into this little nipple on here. So we'll get that started. But mine, I've already sanded it down a little bit, but mine had a lot of kind of roughed up plastic edges. You can see a little bit of the fine stuff right there still. It was significantly larger, so I just took a real light grit sandpaper and just sanded them down a little bit, try to get as much of that off as possible. It looks like the machine that molds them must mold them in a chain or something, and then it comes through and chops them off. So there's like some residual plastic kind of roughed up on there. So there's still a lot more. I think it's just this type of plastic tends to form these little strands. Anyway, let's take a look. I wipe everything down on these intakes when I get them, just to make sure. It's probably unnecessary, but it doesn't hurt. So the next step is to take, I already attached the vacuum line to this little gauge. Make sure it's seated well, and you fish it through hole in here, gearbox, and then you run it out. And we're going to connect that to our air filter assembly. So we have the air filter mounted on its little bracket, and we're going to connect this vacuum line to that little nipple on there, and then run the 4 bolts in and have this thing secured up. We have the 4 Phillips bolts screwed in, tightened up to hold the filter assembly in. You can see that's why they've got that little gauge on there, because you can't really see the filter at all. So without this, you'd have a heck of a time knowing the state of your filter. So hopefully this little guy does well. I mean, it's just based on vacuum, so it should, when the filter gets dirty, it should have less flow, and it should tell you. So not too keen on how kind of wobbly it is in there. I think it may get better once stuff kind of gets warmed up and seated well. I'm gonna go ahead and put the little heat shield on here, and then look at putting the main pipe shield on. I'm not sure all much what it really, I mean, it's supposed to shield obviously the inlet air from engine heat, but I don't think it does a whole heck of a lot. But you're going to need a fairly tight Allen key. It was 5mm for the bolts, but you can see, yeah, it's super tight getting in there. So you're not getting in there with a ratchet or anything like that. You're gonna need a old school Allen wrench. So we got this on. You go ahead and put it in the Jeep. Okay, so here's the box in the Jeep. Fits pretty well, it just slides in the stock pegs. Depending on where this little clamp is on the power steering reservoir, you may have a little bit of contact there. I was thinking about putting something in there, but it's not gonna make a lot of difference. I could try to move the clamp, but there's some headlight harnesses in there, and that clamp's been on there for so long. The indentations are pretty solid for where it is, so I'm not going to be terribly heartbroken if it wears a tiny hole in there. It's not the end of the world. So yeah, we're gonna leave it like that. You can see it's got a little bit, but it's not like pushing hard into it. It just grazes it. So it'll probably wear a little channel in there over time, but it's not the end of the world. This thing isn't perfectly sealed. So we're gonna go ahead, put the other couplings on, and put that main pipe. I gotta put the grommet in the pipe for the air temp sensor. So we're gonna do that. I think that's probably, it is the next step. So we're gonna go ahead and put this guy in the pipe. Okay, we're gonna start putting the main inlet pipe in. Make sure you get your second hose clamp over on this coupler here, silicone coupler. Make it nice and loose, and to help out in clearing this lip here on the air box, I ran this coupler, loosened these clamps up as much as I could, and ran this coupler all the way back to the end of the pipe. So now we can get it to come down nice and easy, and we'll have to fight with it a little to get it to mate up, but this is easier than trying to wedge it in there and bend things and deal with that. Make sure you connect your temperature sensor, which I just realized I had not. I think you should be able to, yeah, should be able to connect it from under. Let's see if we can get it to focus. Yeah, it's under there. You should be able to connect it from under there. I'm gonna do that after. Hopefully I won't have any, I can get my hand down there. I shouldn't have any challenges there. So we're going to shimmy this coupler into place, and at that point we'll be mostly done. So this is everything all buttoned up. Make sure you don't forget to hook up this vent line. This is pretty much, this is the PCV back in, pretty sure. Basically the oil that blows off the PCV, I hate these things routed in, but it's an emissions deal. The kit does not come with a hose clamp for this area, or for this hose. I happen to have one from the previous kit. I don't even know if it came with the other kit, but there's two clamps on it for some goofy reason. And this was, and it could have been just be the way the intake that I had on there before had stretched it or whatever. This wasn't a very tight fit. I remember on my Dodge Challenger I had the same issue, that this wasn't very tight, and I didn't like that. So I just threw the clamp on there. So just, I mean, it's up to you if you want to put a common clamp on there, just make sure it's secured. Yep, everything's buttoned up. Make this intake pipe, it's not terribly thick, it's plastic, so again, when you're tightening these clamps up, don't get crazy. I just use, most people just use a screwdriver. I use a ratchet, but I'm careful to keep, this is a small 1/4 inch drive. I keep one finger at the knurl there and just tighten it till it doesn't want to move, and that's it. That's kind of my cheesy torque method. I find that that's about the same as using a hand driver, cranking it down pretty good. But this, I can control it a little more, and it gets into more spaces, and it's a little faster. So yeah, that's it. Make sure you hook up your temp sensor down there. And again, make sure you get that PCV hooked up. Tighten everybody down. You can see this doesn't fit totally flush. I hope that'll work itself out. There's a little inlet there. Apparently they make a funny little box that hangs off the fender for like a ram air almost, but you have to cut a hole, the slot in your hood. They also make a snorkel for like 300 bucks. If anything, I do the snorkel just because, well, sadly enough, just because it looks cool. But I don't know if I want to cut a hole in my hood. I'd probably buy a cheap hood off Craigslist or something, and cut a hole in that and primer it black or something like that, so I don't mess up the factory hood that I have. Yeah, so I'm not going to bother starting it up. This intake shouldn't be much louder than stock, maybe just slightly. I don't have a good sound reference anyway for the stock one, because I had that rough, it was Rough Country, I confirmed the filter's Rough Country, it just wasn't branded. I had that Rough Country one that was fairly loud, so this will be quiet in comparison. So pretty easy install, well made. It helps.
Okay, I assume that this engine intake wouldn't be too loud, but it's actually got a really nice tone compared to the other one I had. I'm going to give it a punch here and see if anybody can hear it in the video. So that's got a pretty good tone to it. I don't want to go any faster. I'm cruising down the road pretty good here. Yeah, that has a really good throaty tone to it. A lot more than I expected for having that kind of sealed up box and the small, not small, but the kind of isolated intake port. But yeah, it sounds really good. So I would, for 280 bucks, I paid for this off Amazon, I would highly recommend it.